great Alan November with us today. As many of you know, Alan has been a leader in the global education front and really an advocate for connecting classrooms around the world. So we're very honored to have you, Alan. He has a conference, by the way, that is also amazing. I've been to it twice during the summer, and so you may want to take a look at that on his website, which is, I'm assuming, is called Building Learning Communities, and he will have, I'm sure, on his a plug for that at some point, so you might want to take a look at that. And I'm not going to say too much else because I know that we'd rather hear you than me. So thank you, Alan, for sharing your time. We're very excited to hear you, and let me know if you need anything.
And Alan, we turned your mic off because of the echo, so you'll have to turn it back on.
Well, Lucy, thanks a lot. This time of year I miss Chicago, although being back in Massachusetts is not so bad. And it's great that I didn't have to get on an airplane to give this presentation. Yay! So off we go. This is, if any of you have heard me present before, there's some new material here that I'm kind of checking out, kind of my off-Broadway concept. And some of it may sound quite critical about the approach that many schools have taken over the last 30 years about asking questions that have to do with figuring out technology. And I will put to you that maybe we're not been asking the right questions. Because I think if I read the research and if I travel around and try to pay attention, at least on standard measure, there is very little to indicate that the systemic improvement in science or mathematics or writing or any subject has gone up in the United States. And this is after we have spent tens of billions of dollars in technology. No question, there's lots of cool projects. I see cool projects everywhere I go. But the actual measurable improvement in learning is hard to measure, although I have seen it in a few places. So what I want to do is kind of share what I think are the very rare moments that technology is actually harnessed to improve students' skills in things like science, mathematics, and writing. So off we go. I think part of it is we need to sunset and stop doing technology planning. Technology planning has very little to do with learning, I'm afraid. It has to do with stuff. And I think we have to stop doing one-to-ones. It is not about one computer for one child. I think that's obvious that we should have it, but it's a terrible vision, and I don't think we should name it that. And I think we should stop doing education technology. I don't think there should be any more education technology directors. I think we just have to, as much as we can, get the word technology out of the conversation. And I'll try to explain why. I think the real issue is about learning design. The technology is a part of it. Clearly, we've got some powerful new tools. But if you define the problem in terms of improving learning for all of our students, I think the higher order is to call it learning design. So at one time, in both Massachusetts and Illinois, I was an education technology director. If I go back, I want to be a learning design facilitator. I want to worry about the entire context of learning, down to the furniture, the pedagogy. In fact, any day I think pedagogy trumps technology. And I don't think we should do technology planning. I think we should do learning design planning. So I'll be very curious if any of you have thoughts of this. In fact, if any of you have changed your title from Education Technology Director to Learning Design Facilitator, I would love to hear it because I'm just making this up. Although I have had some conversations with good friends who are Education Technology Directors, and I'm 3 for 3 in having those folks consider changing their title. I think one has and one to go and one probably never will. Par for the course. So the critical question, I don't think, are about technology. How much stuff should we have? I think we can all figure out that eventually every kid needs a device. So let's move on. And I think the critical questions to ask are about information and relationships. There are two things that you can do with technology. One is you can access information like you guys are accessing now, and you can talk to people. This isn't great relationship building, but I think everyone understands that with collaborative tools, it's just an amazing opportunity to resort our relationships. So 2 questions. Does everyone in the system have the right information at the right time, the right information about learning, and do we have the right relationships to support learning? And my sense, as I read research and I see different environments, to both those questions, the answer is no. We don't have the right information at the right time, and we don't have the right relationships. So I think we should get those 2 things right before we go out and spend billions of dollars on technology. So off we go. So the first is about students. Are we giving students the right information, and are we giving students the right relationships? One of the astonishing things I think I've learned, and I think I've learned this from Eric Marcos, who does MathTrain.tv and talking with his students, and I've shown those tutorials around the world, recently in Australia. And every time I show student tutorials to students, and I ask them what they think, and I ask the students who created the tutorials what they think, their answer is something like, our teachers know too much. Our teachers explain things the way somebody who already understands it explains it. And when we get student tutorials, they explain it the way a kid needs to hear it. And so the understanding, by the way, of peers, of students helping students, I think is obvious to everyone, that if you have the right friends in school and you sit at the right lunch table and you can ask those friends for help who got it and took good notes and are doing well, you have a major advantage over kids who don't have the right friends and aren't sitting at the right lunch table. So, I don't want to sound too silly about this, but depending on who your friends are, you will probably do better or worse in school. So what if we made it fair? What if we decided that student knowledge is where the action is? And that rather than improving teachers understanding technology, because most teachers, frankly, when they get a blog, it's the teacher's blog. It's not the student's blog, and students end up responding to the teacher. And you get then you get teachers like, Kathy Cassidy in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, who every first grader has their own blog. But that's not the norm that we see, that every first grader has their own blog. And so, I keep coming back to this question of who owns the content and who owns the learning. And I'm convinced that student relationships, building capacity for students to help students learn, deserves a tremendous amount of our effort. I think too much staff development around technology is to teach teachers how to use technology. And I think we need to change that and have students come to staff development with teachers to really build capacity for students to understand how to help their friends and create content that will contribute. And I'll say more about this in a little bit. But I'm convinced that students don't have the right information at the right time. Oh, one other area of that. Clearly, homework was invented before we understood how the brain works. Because we now understand that the students go home and they don't get immediate feedback when they're solving a math problem or a science problem. And they have to take that work into school and have that corrected the next day. Clearly, students don't have the right information at the right time. The brain starts laying down biochemical pathways in half a millisecond. And 400 milliseconds, I'm sorry, half a second. And that kind of brain, the way the brain learns, just doesn't line up with the way we've organized helping students understand whether the work they're doing is right or wrong. And so this whole flip model, which I'm going to refer to in a little bit, is another example of, I think, what we need to do, that we really need to pay attention to how the brain learns and make sure that it has the right information at the right time, rather than a delay of an entire day, or even worse, 2 days. Then the other series of questions to ask is about teachers. Do teachers have the right information at the right time, and do teachers have the right relationships? And I think this one may even be worse than students. I am convinced that teachers don't have the right information to do their best work possible, nor do they have the right relationships. What I mean by information for teachers has been greatly influenced by Eric Mazur. I'll give you a link to a video. He did a keynote for me last summer at the Building Learning Communities Conference, one of the most brilliant keynotes I think I've ever seen. Mazur is the Dean of Applied Physics at Harvard. And, oh, by the way, you'll appreciate this. Mark Zuckerberg was a physics student in Mazur's Introduction to Physics class. Mazur invented Facebook, at least the early model of Facebook. And at least if you look at it, it's astonishingly similar to Facebook. And that was before Facebook, by the way, because Mazur figured out that if you design an online community where students at Harvard can see each other's pictures and post comments, you get a tremendous insight as a professor into the misconceptions and how students are thinking. That there's just this multiplier of student input if you design a Facebook-like world that you don't get in a classroom face-to-face. Just opens up this amazing treasure trove of information that a teacher can scour to understand the dynamic of what's happening in a classroom that you just don't get in the classroom, at least according to Mazur, and I happen to agree with him. And so clearly, all teachers should have privy to online conversations of the students they're teaching. Now, I know every student doesn't have access. I understand that. But clearly, we should be striving for that to make sure that teachers have access to information they currently don't have in a class, because I'm convinced, at least most classes I sat in, still to this day, and as a speaker, when I go to a workshop and the speaker says, "Do you have any questions?" I never have any questions, at least not publicly. I'm not going to raise my hand, but online I will. And so I just think we've got to give this robust community of online access to all teachers so they can have insights into students. And I also think teachers' relationships, especially relationships with the family, relationships with colleagues. I'm talking to the wrong group here because probably all of you are globally connected, but we all know that most of our colleagues are not. They don't understand Twitter hashtags and how to build their own global network. So, you know, this group has this clear sense, I think we all share this, that being globally connected is much more powerful than only having conversations with colleagues in your department. And so this whole sense of, what is this system that's happening now? It's professional learning communities. You know, I have to take issue. Almost all of that work, almost all the staff development I've ever seen on professional learning communities is limited to working with people in your own faculty, when the real action, I think, is building worldwide professional communities. So maybe people have some comments about that too. Anyway, next idea. So there's Mazur, there's the video. Strongly encourage you, if you've never seen Eric Mazur, take a look at the hour keynote that we've put up on our website. I think it's the only presentation that's been videotaped that he's given to a K-12 audience. And this applies all the way down to elementary school. And basically what Mazur is saying is that the flip model, in fact, he may be the first one who developed it. He's been working on this since the early 80s. Mazur went to a conference in the mid-'80s, and he found out that there had been some research. He went to a little research paper, and the researcher basically claimed that there are 4 groups of physics professors, from top-level Nobel Prize-winning, top-ranked teacher to 3 groups that are less than that. Each group only got a 20% increase in student learning from base level. And Mazur sat there, talked to him about this, and he just didn't believe it. He thought at Harvard, with Harvard students and top professors, students must be learning more than 20% on a base level. And for the first time in his career, goes back to Harvard, measures base level, and sure enough, within a couple of weeks, he is only getting 20%. That stunned him. So he tried to sort out what is going on with our current model of teaching. And basically, from that moment on, he studies the brain, and he begins to figure out that students need immediate feedback when they're solving problems. So problems happen in class with a lot of conversation between kids, a tremendous amount of peer conversations. It turns out maybe Socrates was right. Maybe learning is a social engagement, and that the real role of a teacher is not to give answers, but is to ask the most interesting questions, maybe with a little bit of content, but what we really need to do in school is give kids problems to work on and flip it. And then the content will be moving to the web. So that's a process change. That's not simply adding the $1,000 pencil, which I see too much, especially with one-to-one programs. Every kid's taking notes off a laptop while a teacher's transferring knowledge. The Mazur model is completely different, a complete re-engineering of the flow of knowledge and where you solve problems and how you solve problems, with whom you solve problems. So he's changed relationships, he's changed the flow of information, and homework in Mazur's classroom, in part, are students asking questions. So he has a really good handle on the misconceptions and the questions of his students every day, which a lot of professors and teachers simply don't have, because homework is students giving answers instead of asking questions. And so this whole concept of lesson plan for Mazur has changed. Instead of worrying about covering the curriculum, which a lot of us have to do, Mazur focuses his research from content, he shifts it to students' questions. And he figures out what problems to give in class based on students' questions off this Facebook-like website that he's developed. Now, what's really fascinating when you talk to Mazur is he says that the more you know about your subject, the more difficult it is to figure out the issues of an early learner. So he kind of agrees with the kids I've been talking to, that the knowledge of a teacher is often in the way, ironically, of students being given the best scaffolding for moving forward. But conversation with peers who are basically trying to figure this out with you, it can be a much more powerful learning environment than teachers transferring their knowledge as the dominant way of teaching. Anyway, take a look at the video, and but just to let you know, in that video, Mazur gives a little physics presentation about heat and temperature. You know, that when you feel something that's hotter, it's because the molecules are moving faster. So he explains all this to about 1,000 people in the room, and then what he does is he gives us an immediate little quiz of a steel plate with a hole in the middle of it. What happens to the circumference of the hole when energy is added and the thing heats up? Does the circumference get smaller? Does it stay the same? Or does it get bigger? And he's just explained the physics. And he says to everyone, including me, Did you understand? Do you have any questions? I didn't really have any questions. I got it wrong, of course. And the whole room kind of sighed that a Harvard professor giving his best lecture and explaining it in 3 different ways, the majority of the room, given an immediate problem, couldn't get it right. So I was just intrigued by that. You had to be there to really feel the pain. But I can just imagine this is happening in classrooms all around the world. Teachers are giving their absolute best explanations. Kids absolutely think they understand it, but with no immediate problem, homework later, it's too late in terms of how the brain learns. So process change trumps technology. You need technology, but you got to do process change. More process change. Clintondale High School is outside Detroit, and it's the only high school I know. There's the web address. You can see all kinds of videos, principal and kids talking and teachers talking. It's the only high school I know where every teacher has gone through the flip. Certainly in individual high schools, you know, Colorado, there's 2 chemistry teachers learning for mastery below that, another website to check out. Those guys have an amazing flip model in their AP and their chemistry classes, but very often you don't find an entire school, high school, traditional high school, that's gone through transformation. This is the only one I know. I'd love to hear if there's any others. But Clintondale High School used to have 48, 50% flunking of students in important critical subjects. And, you know, and it's a tough, you know, it's an inner city kind of environment. Anyway, outrageous failure rates in standard teaching. And what they did is they decided to do the flip across every teacher. Their rate of student failure now approaches 0 from 50%. It's an astonishing change. And it's not technology, although you need it. It's really a process change that has led to that amazing improvement. And I highly encourage folks to take a look at both of those websites. The Learning for Mastery is only about chemistry, but the Clintondale High School one is an entire high school undergoing transformation, which means we need high school principals who understand process change. You know, clearly with Michael Fullen research from Canada, we know that the role of the principal is going to make or break the culture of schools. Absolute essential person is the principal of a building. And if you look at Clintondale High School, principal's name happens to be Green. He is the guy who made the change, made the call that there has to be process change. It's not the education technology director. You need that person to support, you know, any technologies you need to do the flip, which means you need a website with videos and maybe DVD with videos, and you need, you know, some kind of quicker response. So you do need technology to pull this off, but without question, technology by itself will not lead to that incredible change. It's a design problem. And that's why earlier I suggest that the really important descriptor here isn't technology, it's learning design. So I'd be curious what people think. By the way, the video, one of the videos shows a young lady, a high school student, and she's explaining that her father came over while she's watching the videos at home to get ready to do problems in school the next day. That's the flip. What used to be in class is at home, and what used to be at home is in school. And the father, of course, is confused because he thinks his kids should be doing traditional homework instead of watching videos. And he comes over to complain to her about, get your homework going. And she says, well, I don't have homework like you did, Dad. So there's going to be some resistance from parents, I think. But what she says in the interview is that the father got sucked into watching this video, and he's learning along with his daughter. And I think that's an amazing benefit. I think if we can help parents learn mathematics and science and across the curriculum, because now what's going on in class is at home, I think in some communities that could be pretty important, even inspiring parents to go back to school and develop their own skill set. So one of the spin-off opportunities of the flip is that we can engage parents in reviewing stuff that they might not have learned the first time. So I'm a big fan of the flip for a whole bunch of reasons. The other process change I've seen is this thing we call the digital learning farm, where kids create content like mathtraining.tv. Here, I'll show you. Here's a kid. You can read this list of jobs from designers, scribes, curriculum reviewers. I think one of the most important questions to ask is who owns the learning, not how many computers you have. And too much of the technology we buy actually goes to reinforce teachers owning the learning. And I think we should spend a huge effort trying to do everything we can to empower students to own their own learning. In a way, going back to Socrates, not a new idea. But the new idea, because of tools like screencasting and building your own search engine, we can have students create this incredible content that empowers other kids to learn. You remember earlier, I claimed that kid-to-kid may be a more powerful learning strategy, especially with a thoughtful teacher. No question we're going to have the teacher. But I think we've underestimated this kid-to-kid opportunity, and I'm convinced that kids creating content that supports learning, that's available in a library, is an absolutely essential thing to do. But I should have put up a slide for mathtrain.tv. Take a look at that if you haven't seen it, just as an example of kids solving problems in 6th grade math that are available to people around the world. So this kid-to-kid, kid making a contribution, owning the learning, critical piece. In fact, here's a shot. A friend of mine, Sylvia Talisano in Florida, sent me this photograph. Every kid in that room has a job that they're working on. And all that content, you can see videographer, photographer, interviewers. They got live blogging. They got back channels. They got all kinds of things going on in that classroom. Teacher sitting at her desk, and I interviewed that teacher. That teacher, for the first time in her career, will tell you that kids are working harder than she is. She used to be the one doing everything she could to explain content, transfer her knowledge to kids. But now what she's done is she's created all these jobs, so kids are creating content. And if you can't see, the little girl at the top next to the teacher, she's online in a Skype connection beyond the classroom. So this is a model I think we should strive to. I'm sure many of you are, just giving kids lots of jobs so they have more responsibility for contributing, creating content for the benefit of all kids learning. So here's some interesting questions. Who owns the learning? Are your students producing a legacy? I love this because the answer in most visits I take to schools is no. Students are not producing. In fact, most student work gets thrown away. It doesn't contribute to anything. It's a horrible situation. You go through school in 13 years, and what are you going to take with you when you graduate? I got 2 kids that went to college. They didn't take anything. Not a piece of paper, not a notebook, nothing. And but there are situations where kids have produced a legacy, tutorials or a textbook they've written, with a teacher. They go to college, they keep working on it. So I'm convinced we need to ask this question. What legacy are our students producing that contribute to the learning community? The question about who works hard in the classroom, I'm convinced is essential. If teachers are working harder every day, something's wrong. I think kids should suffer more. They should be working harder. So let me know what you think about that. And the publishing to a global audience, I'm talking to the converted. I bet everybody on this conference call subscribes to this. We just got to figure out how to create opportunity for every one of our students to publish to a global audience. Whenever I talk to kids about motivation, they tell me that because their stuff is seen around the world, they take more care, more effort, they review it afterwards more, they reflect on it more. This publishing to a global audience, I think, is just so critical. So let me keep going. So in all of this, the danger would be thinking that I'm suggesting that teachers are not as important. They're more important than ever. Teachers who can design learning environments where children are contributing and children own the learning and children are globally connected and parent involvement is skyrocketing in terms of capacity building, that, I think, puts the teacher in a much more important position than what I would regard as the relatively easier and low-level skill of simply transferring knowledge, which we're obviously inheriting from the Industrial Revolution. And all of this suggests that the really important questions are not what computer do we need and how do we train teachers to use technology. The really important question is how do we design learning environments that are completely re-engineered from what we're inheriting and really focus on pedagogy and process change instead of focusing on education technology. And with that, I hope it was good enough to criticize. I look forward to having some questions pop up. I hope you'll do that and responding to those. So thanks for listening, guys.
A perfect way to start the conference, Alan. Thank you so much. And I think that we all fervently believe that these processes need to be examined rather than the tools. So thank you very much. Let's do some Q&A right now with Alan. And I would suggest that everybody who wants to ask a question to raise your hand, and then I'll call on you to take the mic, and Alan will respond.
Thanks, Lucy.
I'm not very good at this, so let's hope I can do it. Team 15, fourth grade, can you guys take the mic, or do I need to give you privileges? Go for it, Team 15, fourth grade. I do have my headset on, and Team 15 has the mic.
Lucy, I can't hear them at all. Can you?
No, I don't. Let me give somebody else the mic. Noble, you're next, okay?
Good morning, everyone. Alan, great keynote. Thanks for that. I run an organization, Education Beyond Borders, and this is exactly, I'm an educational technologist, but a lot of them I work in Africa, many countries in Africa in rural areas, and many are trying to push and be competitive and get online. And educational technology, or ICTs, is something that they're really trying to push for. And for me, I am trying to guide them and facilitate to look at e-readiness, and what that means is pedagogy and how to engage learners first. So the whole idea, looking around project-based, so moving from that teacher center to the learner center is very important. And the other important piece that I want to bring up is what you talked about, the global collaboration. As educators, we need to be accountable to, we're always worried about our class size, but I feel if we're not reaching a broader audience or helping to facilitate the connection between our students and students in developing countries, we're missing a big piece of the global voice, and we're actually contributing to the huge global digital divide and educational divide. So, a lot about this conference is about that global collaboration towards global education. And the big piece then, is how do we rethink who we connect to, but also our patients that we can connect to the developing country to bring in that global voice. Because what we need to do is help them leapfrog where we've been and not replicate what we're doing, but move towards that more global interconnectedness. And that, I think, is the big piece for us as educators, is to kind of bring that audience to our classrooms. So I'm wondering how if you have any thoughts about how can we support more connections with developing regions.
Wow, fantastic. Well, I can tell you that I was personally involved in a project in South Africa in a township with poverty beyond anything I have ever seen. I had an opportunity to go with a group from England. I was asked to facilitate a 5-year partnership between schools across England and schools across this township. About 1.5 million people in the township. And as you know better than I do, they have access to the internet once a week in the principal's office because the cost is just so outrageous in that part of the world. But having said that, you can still do things once a week. You can ship DVDs. I mean, we just have to recognize the technologies that we have in the West may not be available in a township in South Africa. But I think it's essential, frankly, that we also get as much, it changed my life to be able to go there. And I think as much as possible, we're going to need to go there, like you are, and get kids engaged in the summer and other times in actually seeing the world. And I think if we introduce them to that part of the world through the web, we can increase that interest. But short of that, I am convinced that using something like Kiva, I don't know what you think about Kiva, you'll have to let me know. I happen to know the woman who started it, Jessica Flannery, who did it because of a visit to Africa, where kids are involved in tracking what one community is doing in that part of the world for more than a year, I think is an absolutely essential experience. So short of being able to go and develop your own partnerships, there's certainly something like Kiva, kiva.org, which would be an early start. And I would start that as early as I could, first or second grade. I'm hoping, in fact, that every second grade class will eventually have an experience like Kiva. So I don't have a better answer for you. Lucy, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Team 15, you're next, and I'm going to give you privileges.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Team 15. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I am wondering about teachers who are having a difficult time getting the momentum going in their schools. I mean, I'm very invigorated about this. I have a couple colleagues that are interested, but it seems like it's very difficult to get the momentum going. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I can tell you by trial and error, the most successful single strategy I have is to ask teachers what they love to teach. What's your favorite unit? What's the most fun you've ever had in your classroom where at the same time students really got it? And most teachers can tell you that. And you make a list of those favorite units. Then you take various tools. Like I'll give you an extreme case. Let's say a teacher's favorite unit is having kids memorize the 50 state capitals. God forbid, but I can find you teachers like that. And so what you can do is take something like that and show them, all right, here's Google Map. Now you can show them screencasting. Show their kids, actually. And have the kids learn how to walk around the State House Capitol shooting video as if they were on the ground. You know, I don't know if you know how to do that, but I can show you how to do that. And then collaborate globally, get a teacher in Canada who's teaching the provincial capitals and a teacher in Australia who's teaching the Australian state capitals to put their capital on the map. So now you've gone global. You've taken something that's purely American, the 50 state capitals, you've made it global, you're building community, and you're building a legacy at the same time, because once you create this map of kids shooting video around 50 state capitals and the rest, then you can build on that in following years. And kids who go on to high school and junior high can always refer back to that map when they have another round of history to look at. So you can take anything, including the 50 state capitals, and attach all these ideas to it. But I've learned that if you start with something a teacher really loves to do, you don't have to battle the content. And so starting with curriculum instead of technology, that's really important. All right, Lucy, back to you.
Norman, you're up.
There, I'm talking now. I'm sorry. The question that I have, particularly with creating all of these things and having the students know or own the knowledge, is the problem is so very often, particularly in high-end independent schools, the school wants to brand everything that the school does. And so nothing can be wrong. How do we overcome that?
I have some experience with high-end independent schools. My college roommate was the youngest professor at the Harvard Business School. He went to Exeter, and that's kind of a fancy boarding school in New England, maybe one of the top. And I've been to lots of other top-ranked independent schools. And I'll tell you, at least at Exeter, they are built on what they call the Harkness model, which is really a Socratic model, where the role of a teacher is really to ask questions. And I've watched them teach at Exeter. It's an astonishingly powerful model of students having to develop critical thinking and rhetoric and debate. And in fact, you could take the teacher out of that equation and have them go out for a cup of coffee. Those kids will still be working. So I don't know what independent schools you're talking about, but I can tell you I've been to some that are already there. Students, they highly, highly value students owning their learning and eventually owning their knowledge. But I'm going to stop there.
A follow-up? Okay, any other questions? If you have a question, please raise your hand for Alan. There goes my phone. I didn't turn it off this morning. Sorry about that. Norman, if you want to say something, let me know. Anybody else want to ask a question for Ellen?
Yeah, Lucy,
Ellen, tell us a little bit about your conference since we are waiting. Oh, we have one more question coming in, and why don't you tell us about your conference?
Go ahead.
Hang on a second. Okay, the microphone is given over to the person who's number 2 in line. Do you want to press the talk button and ask your question?
Lucy, I'm not hearing anything here.
Neither am I. We'll wait and see if she wants to take the mic. Mr. Tibbs, I'll give you the mic in a second. Hang on.
I was just wondering how assessment fits into your idea of the flipped classroom. Well, not your idea, but of the idea of the flipped classroom.
Yeah, that's a great question. Assessment's always important. One of the ways in class, and I went to visit a class in New Jersey, in Newark, New Jersey, where half of a high school takes the AP physics exam. Just to give you a reference, in the state of New Jersey, the norm is 1.5%. And in this one high school that's done the flip in physics, it's 50%. And so the way they run assessment is students have clickers in class, and teachers get feedback. Every 10 minutes they put out a problem, and students brainstorm and answer that. But the responses, as you probably know, are all pegged to that individual clicker. And so instead of giving a quiz on Friday or next week, you're basically getting assessment data every day in class. Mazur, because it's Harvard and those kids have access to the web, he actually puts up a quiz every night, and kids respond to questions. In addition, kids in his class, and that's 100, also have a device pegged to who they are. So Mazur is actually getting more assessment data, and so is that teacher in Newark, New Jersey, than a teacher who's not doing the flip. You actually get, as I said earlier, more information, not less, which is absolutely essential for then personalizing instruction. In fact, Jonathan Bergman and Aaron Sams, the teachers that if you check out that chemistry website, the mastery website I put up earlier, those guys will tell you that because of the flip, they talk to every student every single day. And they didn't do that before they modeled the flip. And so not only do you get standard assessment coming back, but you also get personal conversation. I know that sounds outrageous, every day with every student. And that's the end of my answer.
I'm going to try Hien right now. Hien, make sure that you're ready to take the mic.
Lucy, I can't hear anything, which is a shame.
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to give them a moment. there to take the mic. Ian, this is your last chance to try and take the mic. Click on the button that says Talk in the upper left-hand corner, please. Norman, why don't you go ahead and offer your follow-up question?
Okay. I'm just wondering, and this is actually a different sort of topic, in the flipped classroom, what does the teacher do if the student hasn't done anything at home by watching the videos?
Yeah, that's another great question. In Newark, there is no homework. If you just for a moment give up, clear your head, and give up the concept of homework, and assume that if you give students 5 to 6 problems every day in class, with a teacher who's able to walk around, and students who are able to refer to videos if they have to in class, with no homework, you can get half a high school in Newark prepared for the AP physics exam. I know that sounds outrageous. It flies against any instinct we have. And if I hadn't seen it, I wouldn't have believed it. I would be in the position you're in thinking, this cannot work. But I did see it, and it's astonishing. By the way, a lot less work for teachers. You don't have to get after kids to correct their homework. You don't have to make kids feel badly about not doing it. Every kid can achieve success every day. Oh my gosh, it's astonishing.
I'm going to call on you next. Barbara, are you there?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry. I wanted to ask a question of Alan that Kristen Tarnas asked here in the chat area. So she asked, how do you work with parents on the change in pedagogy since they once were students themselves?
Bingo. And I actually do a lot of that. I'm often called in to run interference for the parent community. And I enjoy doing it, by the way. What I do is I show them Eric Mazur's YouTube video at Harvard. And I say, look, you want your kids to go to Harvard? I mean, how high is high? Depending on the community, this works better in a wealthy suburb than it may in the inner city. But I'll say, look, the elite universities, and I'll show them MIT has moved 90% of their professors have podcasts. And the same thing's going on at Stanford and Berkeley. So when we look at the elite universities, we see a phenomenal amount of online material produced by professors. So why go to class? If I can get it off my iPhone, sync to iTunes U, why would I go to class? And the answer is because that's where you're going to have conversations. That's where you're going to be solving problems. And in fact, when students first go through this transition, who are high-performing students, they're often frustrated because they're so good at teachers just telling them the answer and giving it back on a test. All of a sudden, they have to work harder. And so you got 2 points of resistance. You have their parents, and you have the kids themselves. And so you just have to get through it. And my best shot is giving parents an argument that the elite universities are doing it, and if it's good enough for the rich, it should be good enough for the rest of us.
Alan, thank you very much. I think we're going to give everybody some time to get to their next session because right now it's getting close to the next start of the next wave of sessions. What I suggest people do is Alan has joined our online community, and you can go and leave a comment for him on his profile there, or you can email him directly. I'm sure he'd be happy to respond. I want to give him a few minutes to talk about his conference, because I think it's one of the more valuable conferences out there if you're looking for the best of the best. So, Alan, do you want to tell us a little bit? And Norman and Hian, I'm sorry, but we have to move on to our next session, so I just want to make sure Alan has the last word here. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Well, Lucy, you're kind. Yeah, Building Learning Communities, BLC. And I do think it may be one of the most fascinating conferences. And the reason is because, as you know, I travel the world and try to find the absolute best ideas from all over the world. This year, our keynote is one of yours. Geeta is coming from India. Ewan is coming from Scotland. And a lot of it is about process change. I mean, the two guys from Colorado who've done a chemistry flip, Bob Goodman, who designed the flip in physics in New Jersey. So it's people that I think are not only good technically, but they're really, really good as learning designers. They thought a lot about the whole context of learning. And so if you're looking for a really good brain tickle, and last year we had people from 23 countries, come to Boston in July. It's Building Learning Communities. You can find us on the web at blcconference.com. I'm quite proud of it. It's probably one of the best things I do. And love to have you come. You will not be bored, and you will meet people from around the world. All good fun. Thanks, Lucy.
Again, Alan, it's been wonderful. This is a great start. It's a perfect tone for setting up this conference. So I appreciate you coming, and we look forward to learning more from you in various modes over time. Everybody, the next sessions are starting soon. I posted a link in the chat to a quick links page that shows you not by time but by speaker and that sort of thing. If you want to go to the web page and click on sessions and schedule, you can look at a Google Calendar in your own time zone that tells you what's coming up next. So that's your best place to go. It's globaleducationconference.com. In the left-hand box, on the left-hand side, you'll see sessions and schedule. And you can see things in your own time. Right now, I need to stop the recording, and I need to have everybody leave the room in order for the recording to process. It will be available online on that quick links page, and I think within an hour or so it's processed. So this will be archived for posterity, and you can review it at your leisure and pass it on to your colleagues. So thanks again for everything, everybody, and we'll see you in the next set of speakers. Thanks again, Alan. We really appreciate it.
Oh, huge thrill, Lucy. Thank you. Bye-bye.